Hey YouTube universe, I got the world's heavyweight championship draped over my shoulder. Ooh, yeah, because I'm talking about a real world's champion today. Not talking about the macho man Randy Savage. Talking about a champion that came some time before him. Talking about the All-American boy Bob Backlund. This is going to be kind of a 3-in-1 video. A while back I did a book review on Dirk Benedict's book. He was the face man on the A-Team, and he wrote a book called Kamikaze Cowboy. And that book was so inspiring that I had to call it a book review / real talk, because he talks about real life things that will help you in your life. And Bob Backlund's book is so inspirational that same deal here. This is going to be kind of a book review / real talk / tribute to the man. It was originally written in 2015 and was co-written by Rob Miller. And the book starts out with a really lovely introduction by Bob and Rob, and they're talking about why Rob was the right guy to write this book. Rob was looking for a hero in his life. He was looking to reconnect with his original hero that he grew up watching. My personal experience with Bob Backlund is I had never seen a single Bob Backlund match when I was growing up. I think the first Bob Backlund match I ever watched was probably when he came back in, I think it was 1992. As the All-American boy. I had heard about him though. He had always been mentioned here and there on wrestling broadcasts. I saw so much of him in the wrestling magazines. He was this mythic character who had been champion for almost 6 years. And Bruno Sammartino's reign was 7 years, which was mind-boggling. How could Bob Backlund have made it almost as long as Bruno Sammartino? So I knew of his incredibly long title reign, but I also had heard so much from other wrestlers of that era who didn't have the kindest things to say about Bob Backlund. And there were a lot of opinions from other wrestlers saying he was not a draw. He was a goody two-shoes, howdy-doody. The crowds didn't love him. And it seems as though the consensus from a lot of wrestlers back then who don't think highly of Mr. Backlund, of Bob Backlund, is Vince Sr. wouldn't listen to the crowd. He wouldn't listen to the wrestlers. He just made up his mind, and that was that. This book has completely changed my opinion of Bob Backlund, even though I had a very high opinion of Bob Backlund before reading this book. So since the advent of the internet, I've been able to watch some Bob Backlund matches, and I really enjoy his skill, his talent, but I never really paid close attention to the crowds. And as I was reading this book, what was really interesting to do is to see him talk about certain matches and then look them up on the internet and watch them with Bob's observations in mind. And I believe that Bob was a much bigger draw than a lot of people give him credit for, because when he talks about we had the crowd going absolutely crazy, it doesn't come off as a typical wrestler's book where the wrestler is really patting himself on the back, really talking about how amazing he was. Ego, ego, ego. Bob Backlund seems like a person of very, very little ego. If he has an ego, he's got it well in check. And it's more of a recital of facts rather than I was so great. And he never comes off as bitter or complaining. He's got the most amazing positive mental attitude, PMA. And so that's a really cool aspect of the book, to be able to get a different perspective on his matches. I've gone back and watched some of his matches. I've had them playing on during my workouts, and they're so inspiring to know the intensity and the focus and the passion behind the man. It really gives me a different perspective of how he approached his matches, and now I really see the intensity and the passion that he had. The most surprising thing about the young All-American boy from Princeton, Minnesota, is how rough his upbringing was. It was incredibly rough, much rougher than you can possibly imagine, and I think it took a lot of courage for Bob Backlund to share everything that he went through growing up, and he shared it in hopes that it would help other people, inspire them. Maybe they're in a similar or worse situation, and that they could read his story and go, hey, it doesn't matter if you've gone through this. You can still be world heavyweight champion for almost 6 years. The first video that I vividly recall seeing of Bob Backlund speaking was a return promo where he's sitting there and he's very calm, he's very chill, he's introducing himself. Hi, I'm Bob Backlund and I was world heavyweight champion. And what really struck me was how deep his voice was. Not at all what I was expecting, because I had seen pictures. He always seemed so smiling, happy-go-lucky. Video clips that they would show of past champions, and he would be bouncy. And I never imagined his voice would be so gruff and rough. It's making more sense now, having read the book. He had a really tough upbringing. Alcoholic father who abused his mother, who beat on him too. Bob fell in with a really bad crowd when he was young, really, really bad crowd. And the turning point in his life, something that really set him straight, was that he almost got in a big bar fight with his pals, with some very dangerous hombres at a bar. And his pals set him up. They made it seem as though there was going to be this big fight. And then Bob went out to fight the good fight or fight the bad fight. And when he looked around, his pals had deserted him, literally left him for dead. And, he thinks that maybe he should have gotten beaten to death that night. But luckily the opposing force had pity on him. They saw that he was played, that he was naive, and he had been duped. And they told him, get out of here, get lost. They could have just annihilated him. But they let him go, and that moment changed Bob's life. He learned to be have a lot more scrutiny when trusting friends, and that really set him on the right path. He also got into athletics, which changed everything about his life. And it's just amazing to see what little he came from. A guy who couldn't afford new clothes. His clothes were all tattered and rattered, and he was brutally bullied because of his clothes. He had the same old beat up pair of boots for the longest time. To go through all of that and just lose himself, immerse himself in training. He had no money, he had no privilege, but he had focus, he had determination, he had time. He used the things that he did have to their utmost instead of wallowing in the things that he didn't have. And he did win an amateur wrestling championship, an NCAA Division II championship in 1971. And that's an interesting story too, because he should have won another championship as well. But that was the one time in his life that he was overconfident. He was on a winning streak. Everyone was patting him on the back, telling him, you can't lose, you can't lose. So he didn't prepare for the championship the way he normally would. And he got beat because he got ahead of himself, and he took that really, really, really hard, extremely hard, possibly too hard. We're talking lock yourself in a room and just dwell and dwell and dwell on it. But being so intense about that loss, he was trying to teach himself the lesson. It's okay to lose. It's okay to make mistakes as long as you don't lose the lesson. And I think Bob took that defeat, and just like everything else, he squeezed every single drop out of that loss to learn the lesson and to never, ever, ever forget it. The book goes in depth about his wrestling career, incredibly humble beginnings. You will also not believe just how difficult the start of his career was. Didn't have a place to stay, so he slept in the trunk of his car, literally. In the trunk, shut the trunk. And it's not just a case of he's sleeping in a trunk. He was in some bad neighborhoods and fearing for his life. There would be street gangs all around. Sometimes they would even sit on the car that he's in. And he's just hoping that they don't check the trunk because he'd be a goner. So not just discomfort, but actual risk of his life going through that through the early years. But once again, the theme, the message of the book is not just wrestling. It's not just entertainment. There's a lot of great wrestling books out there, but this is not a wrestling book. This is kind of like Rocky is not a boxing movie. It's about other things, just happens to have boxing in it. This is not a wrestling book. This is about squeeze every opportunity out of everything. So even at the beginning, Bob was using all of those early opportunities of his to do more, to go the extra mile. And it was noticed by a lot of the people that he worked with. Terry Funk is one in particular who went, I like this kid, Bob Backlund. And Terry was running his own organization at the time in Amarillo, Texas. And he put one of his belts on Bob and built him up and built him up. And the more Bob got, he never got complacent. All he did was keep squeezing and squeezing more and more opportunity out of every single potential opportunity, squeezing the potential out of everything. So he would go from one territory to the next, to the next. If you went to a territory that didn't continue that rise, he was still polite. He was still appreciative. He wasn't bitter about it. Still no ego. It's so refreshing to read a book about a wrestler with not a hint of ego in it. None whatsoever. Just about a guy who's trying to do the right thing for his family and for everyone else too, because his motivator isn't just, I want to get rich and famous. His motivator is, if I get in this position right here, you know how many kids like me I can help? How many kids who are getting beat by their fathers, who don't have any clothes, and that's hard enough, but are being made fun of at school for not having any decent clothes, having holes in the clothes, tattered clothes, not great fashion. He wanted to help those kids who went through things that he went through. That was his motivator. That was his goal. And I think that's what kept him going forever, to this day, still going, because he wasn't focused on himself. We see a lot of wrestlers and just people in the entertainment business in general who are focused about their own growth, their own gain. Yay me, I've reached this milestone, I've reached that milestone, and just always hungry for the next thing for themselves. And it's so refreshing to see a real genuine guy like Bob Backlund who, if he gets something, he goes, great. How can I use this to help other people? He truly is the Tom Hanks of the wrestling world. Just an absolute heart of gold. And another thing that totally changed my perspective on something in this book is the way Bob talks about Vince McMahon Sr. The current Vince McMahon, Vincent Kennedy McMahon's father, Vince McMahon Sr., who owned the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, the WWF, before it was the WWF and then WWE. I had always heard that Vince Sr. was a man of his word. If he gave you his word was his bond, no contracts necessary, just a handshake. And Bob really just constantly reinforces that throughout the book. It's really cool to finally hear Bob's side of the story. I've heard superstar Billy Graham's side of the story several times, where Billy Graham would say he beat Bruno for the belt and he was drawing great crowds. Madison Square Garden was selling out over and over again, and he should have kept the belt. He should have turned face. He should have turned good guy. And superstar Billy Graham could have been Hulk Hogan 5 years before Hulk Hogan. And Vince Sr. said, sorry, I promised Bob, and a promise is a promise. So he does promise Bob Backlund the title 1 year before he gives Bob the title. And he gives it to him on the day, right to the day he said they were going to put the belt on him. Now, Billy Graham's side of the story is, what an idiot, what a mistake, he should have stuck with me. Bob's reasoning for this is Vince's reasoning. Bob doesn't, he goes into why Vince made this decision, and he's recounting exactly what Vince McMahon Sr. said to him. And what Vince Sr. said to Bob Backlund was, I want an all-American boy. I want a hero for the young people. I want the good guy to win. I want people to be happy. I want them to come back and buy more tickets, but I want them to be happy. That's Vince Sr. for you. There's been a lot of stories about Vincent Kennedy McMahon. He hates being called Junior, and I'll respect that. I'll call him Vincent Kennedy McMahon. There's been a lot of stories about his business practices, his ethics. He's done a lot of great things. Some people have said he's done a lot of not great things. But as far as Vincent Kennedy McMahon's father goes, this guy sounded like a really, really awesome human being who didn't micromanage. He would just lay out a finish. He'd meet with the wrestlers in a bathroom before the match, and he would tell them, this is how I want the match to end. You come up with the rest. And he just let the wrestlers do their thing because they're the wrestlers. They know how to listen to the crowd, read the crowd. A very important part of this book that Bob repeats over and over again is when to pull the plug on a match, when to finish a match. It feels like these days, matches just don't know where to end. A lot of the time, finisher, kick out. How many times can you kick out of a wrestler's finisher? It's not a finisher if you can kick out of it. It's supposed to be like Jake's DDT, right? Or the leg drop from Hulk Hogan. You don't kick out of a finisher. And it was really interesting to hear Bob recall matches with Don Morocco or Greg the Hammer Valentine or Pat Patterson, Jimmy Snuka, and say at about the 22-minute mark, we felt like that was as high as we could possibly take them, and we ended it. Always ending the match at the climax. That's a real empathic connection with the audience, really tuning in and seeing how they're feeling and not milking it, knowing, hey, this is all we're going to get. Sometimes it was a 10-minute match, 12-minute match. Sometimes it was an hour-long draw, a Broadway they call it. But it's interesting to hear him, like for something like a cage match, go 12 minutes was all we could get out of it. We could tell that was it. We were done. Anything else would be milking it and leave them bored, which means they won't want to come back. If you end the match on the climax, they can't wait to come back. Just like if a movie ends with an awesome climax, quickly wraps up, man, I want a sequel. But if a movie, I love Return of the King, Lord of the Rings, but if it ends, has a great climax, and then I love the ending of Return of the King. I think it's fantastic, but it is thorough. That leaves you not wanting more. That leaves you very satisfied. So this mentality of end a match on the climax so that they'll come back for the rematch or the next match, the next program, it seems to make a lot of sense to me. So there's a lot of great wrestling information in there, some cool little tidbits I'd always been curious about, like what did Bob Backlund think of the big green belt after they changed the little one that he had held for so many years, the same one that Bruno Sammartino held for many years. Interesting to hear him talk about that stuff. Also, how he dropped the belt to the Iron Sheik. That part's really, really sad. It does feel like a complete, great emotional journey because you've got the great success, and then you've got the hardship, and Bob trying to work through the depression of losing the belt. And the really interesting thing about it is he was fully prepared because he saw superstar Billy Graham go through the exact same thing when he lost the belt to Bob. And so it's interesting to see him know the day is coming. Always be aware the day is coming when I'll have to pass the belt on to someone else like it was passed on to me. So he's prepared, he's aware, and it's still happening to him, but he's got this awareness about it. Like, I know what's happening to me. I know why I feel the way I do. And he keeps doing the things that helped him be successful in order to deal with that difficulty. He still does his workouts. He still helps other people. He still feels the sadness of losing the belt, especially the way he lost it. It really wasn't in keeping with the way Vince Sr. had done business for the previous 6 years. It just seemed out of the blue. It was quite obviously Hulk Hogan is our new guy. And one part that I thought was kind of unfortunate was Vincent Kennedy McMahon even tells Bob, you're winning the belt back next month. Don't worry, you're dropping it to the Iron Sheik, but you'll get it back next month. And Bob says, also totally not in a bitter way, it didn't come off as bitter at all, but he says, I think Vince Kennedy McMahon told me that so that I would not dispute, not cause trouble, dropping the belt to the Iron Sheik. That was never an issue anyway. So it's kind of disappointing that Vince didn't trust Bob. Vince Kennedy McMahon didn't trust Bob, when Bob seems to be the most trustworthy wrestler maybe that ever lived, or one of them up there. You can probably put him up there with some of the old-time greats like Lou Thesz. The book also has a number of passages by other wrestlers too. So Roddy Piper has a few in there. Don Morocco has a few in there. But the highlight, Terry Funk has some great ones too, but the highlight was Harley Race. Longtime wrestling fans, when you think of Harley Race, probably the first word that comes to mind is tough. Every single wrestler that's done a shoot interview, when they're asked about Harley Race, tough. That's how tough. Harley Race, one of the toughest wrestlers ever, got in a car accident when he was young, scars all over his arms, covered them up with tattoos. That's just incredibly tough sounding, like having your arms covered with scars so you get tattoos to cover them up. And Harley went through even more than just physical disfigurement and injuries. He he lost a wife in that car accident too. But every wrestler talks about how tough Harley is. High pain threshold. You don't want to mess with them. The champions, when they were selected in the old days of wrestling, needed to be tough because sometimes somebody in a different territory would try something funny. And if someone hooked a pin on the champion, the ref had to count it. That's it. You got a new champion. So it wasn't just about having a wrestler with great personality and great choreography, but they had to actually be really tough for real. And Harley's passages over and over and over really get the point across that Bob Backlund was tough. You have no idea how tough Bob Backlund was. He may have smiled a lot. He may have done that over the top. I don't think it was over the top. I think it's very endearing, but holding the belt over his head and whoa, yay! Like every time he came out, he showed the type of elation that one would show when they win the belt for the first time. And he was doing that constantly. Beginning of the match, end of the match, 6 years into his reign, he was still doing it. Reminded me a lot of Daniel Bryan when he started the yes thing. It was so like over the top. He's still doing the celebration. Like months after he won the belt, he's still doing it. That's what Bob Backlund was doing in his reign. So tough wasn't a word that I necessarily thought would be associated with Bob Backlund, but if Harley Race says it over and over and over again, then I believe it. I believe that one of the reasons Bob had the belt, in addition to being a great draw, really having the fans invested in him, vicariously living through him, his passion and his dedication, was also his toughness. No one would dare try this guy. And each chapter starts with some really inspiring quotes from Napoleon Hill. This one in particular that I have open right now says, "Put ideas and your definitiveness of purpose to work." Great reminders that you're not just reading a wrestling book here. You're reading a roadmap to how to own your life and have success in your life. So Bob ends off with his 18 principles of healthy living. And I wanted to read those for you right now because I thought they were incredibly inspiring. So here goes. Number 1, in each and every interaction you have with people, treat them the way you would want to be treated. Be kind to each other. The fact is, if everyone in the world just did that, most of the world's problems would be solved. I have tried my best to do this every day, both inside and outside the wrestling business, and it has served me well. Number 2, find a way to get your kids involved in athletics from a young age. Doing so will teach them discipline, responsibility, and how to be part of a team. It will give them strength and balance, and build their concentration and their self-esteem. As the story has shown, although I did not get involved in athletics until I was 10 years old, once I did, athletics saved my life. Number 3, this one's tough. A lot of us struggle with this one because food is so darn yummy. But number 3 is eat to fuel your body, not for emotional support. Quality going in means quality coming out. People have always asked me what I ate to maintain such a healthy body for so many years. For breakfast, I have either an emulsification of raw spinach, raw sweet potato, banana, yogurt, a scoop of low sugar protein powder, and strawberries or blueberries or cantaloupe, or oatmeal with peanuts, raisins, and pumpkin seeds. I also take 1 multivitamin and a shot of Bragg's apple cider vinegar, which I am convinced eliminated the rheumatism in my joints. Lunch is lots of veggies and some lean protein. I don't eat bread anymore, and I have never put man-made sugar into my body. Whew, that's a tough one. Dinner is a wrap or a salad with chicken or turkey on it. Or we have homemade soup. Basically, the more green you eat and the less meat you eat, the better off you are. Doing those things has helped me maintain a strong body, overcome a bout with Lyme disease, and battle the aches and pains that invariably come from 40 years of body slams and suplexes. Number 4, get enough sleep. Getting enough rest at night is how your body heals itself and how your immune system gets restored. I go to bed at 9:30 or 10 p.m. every night, and I get up at 6:30. If you are ever short on sleep, this is a really good one. Lie down on the floor. Put your hands by your side. Get in a relaxed state. And try to lower your heart rate as much as you can. and get into a meditative state for 15 to 30 minutes. After that time, your body will be revived and you will be able to finish the day with energy and enthusiasm, but not affect your sleep at night. It's a good one to remember. It's not always just 8 hours that is going to make you feel refreshed. Sometimes you're in a pinch and 15 minutes is enough. Number 5, maintain a positive mental attitude, PMA, no matter what happens to you. Search tirelessly for the silver lining that will allow you to turn a negative into a positive, as there is almost always a way through the toughest of times. If you ever find yourself feeling hopeless, just remind yourself that before I became world champion, I was homeless, starving, and living in the trunk of my car. Imagine how different my life would have been if I had abandoned my PMA and given up. Number 6, apply mental focus. I have been physically and nutritionally fit for most of my life. But in 1984, when I got out of the wrestling business, I realized how important the intellectual part of life was, how lacking I was in that area, and how hard it was to change something that you had been ignoring for 35 years. When I got my mind set the right way, I realized that it was probably going to take me until the end of my life to get my mind where I wanted it to be. And I'm willing to accept that challenge. Remember that both the mind and the body have to be exercised, and that both will get better with age and use as long as you continue to use them. You can augment your intelligence at any age, and it's when you quit using it and get lazy that your mind deteriorates. There are 2 books I read that helped me get my mind in the right place after wrestling. Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, which I'm reading right now, and his 17 Principles of Success. I recommend them both to you for your thought and reflection. Number 7, cultivate a healthy self-esteem. Find little ways that you can win every day, whether it is simply by pushing hard through a daily workout or practice, solving a tough problem, or just by eating right all day. By accumulating these little victories, your self-esteem will grow from a seedling into an oak tree. Number 8, resist peer pressure and set the example you know is right for others to follow. After my experience at the Kitten Club in 8th grade, I learned never to do things because other people wanted me to make other people happy, or to try to make friends. Instead, I tried to be a role model for others to follow. It was not always easy. Number 9, be respectful. Be more concerned about giving respect where it is deserved than getting respect. Because the fact is, when you give respect, you get respect. Teach your children to respect themselves, their teachers, and their elders. It is an increasingly rare sentiment in the world that instantly makes the world a better place. Number 10, be reliable. Be on time, trustworthy, and accountable. When you say, do. And when you promise, deliver. That is the stuff that champions are made of. Number 11, be self-reliant. Be hardworking and industrious and take control of the things that matter in your life. If you depend on yourself, you should never be disappointed. Number 12, save money on a daily basis. Save to educate your children and teach them. Also, put a little bit away every day. Pay yourself first with the money you make, so there is always something in the kitty. My wife and I play a little game each day where we try to find the most money that other people have dropped or left lying around. It helps to keep us focused on the importance of every dime and to remember the days when we didn't have enough. Number 13, don't live above your means. Financial struggle is one of the biggest strains on marriages and families. Someone who doesn't have the income to support it shouldn't have 3 big screen TVs and a Cadillac. For a long time, I was one of those people. I've eaten a lot of tuna fish out of a can, and Corky and I bought our first house with cash, not a mortgage. Try to have at least a year's worth of money saved up, so if things take a turn for the worse, or you are confronted with an unusual opportunity, you won't be caught short. Remember that when Vince Sr. asked me if I had the $80,000 deposit for the world title, I had the money to give him, even though he never actually made me produce it. Imagine how I would have felt if I hadn't saved enough for the deposit and had been passed over because of that. Number 14, find something to do that you love doing and then keep doing it. I know a lot of people who are over 80, didn't retire, are still active physically and mentally and spiritually, and are still going strong. I started an oil business when I was 59 years old, sold it when I was 65, and am now moving on to the next exciting phase of my life as an author and a motivational speaker. Number 15, make your work life fun. You can find some way to do this no matter what your career is, as long as you can get your mind focused on the right thing. When I was delivering oil to someone's house, I focused on how I was keeping other people's children warm. And that's what got me up at 3:30 on a snowy and cold morning to deliver that oil. Number 16, if you are a parent, take the responsibility to raise your own children. Don't leave that most important work for others to do. Set rules and guidelines with your children so that they understand their purpose, and then require your children to live by them. When our daughter Carrie was growing up and went out with her friends, the rule was that Carrie had to come home and give my wife a kiss when she got home. It was a simple rule, but it was one she agreed to. We didn't have a lot of rules at our house, but that was one of them. My wife stayed home while Carrie was young until she went to school. They spent a lot of time together when I was away, and our daughter is a mature, responsible citizen of the world because of it. Number 17, there is joy to be found in every day. Seek it. And finally, number 18, look forward, not backward. The past is gone. Learn what you can from it, cherish your memories, and move on. Stay focused on the many great things that are going to happen for you in the future. After I lost the world title, I thought that my best days were behind me, and that there would be no way to recapture that kind of happiness again. I was wrong. This book is definitely on my top 3 greatest wrestling books ever. Mick Foley's has been there since the very beginning. He was one of the first to ever write a book, and his book is very, very entertaining, and it has a lot of heart and soul. Bret Hart's book is on that list as well, because Bret's book is just like Bret's matches. It tells an incredible story. The attention to detail really draws you in, and it's just a really satisfying read once you're done. Bob Backlund's book is so uplifting and inspiring. It's not just entertaining. It's not just a fun story. It's a roadmap on how to own your life, how to be successful, how to cope with certain things that are thrown in your way, reinforcement, reminders of lessons you already know. Maybe there are things that you figured out on your own and they've been working, and maybe you've forgotten them. And sometimes you just need a former world heavyweight champion, a guy who's held the big gold belt for 6 years, to remind you you're doing the right thing. Keep on the right track. So Bob Backlund's book, From All-American Boy to Professional Wrestling's World Champion, is a fantastic read, whether you're a wrestling fan or not. He's a great human being. I really liked how sincere he was, how genuine he was. Wrestlers can be extremely entertaining, but sometimes when you find out the real person behind the persona, it can be disappointing. And it's just amazing to learn that Bob Backlund is not a persona. Bob is as real can be. Maybe amping up the excitement maybe a little bit back in the day, but maybe not. Maybe he just is that full of passion and joy, and it's not an act. It's genuine just because of the hard work that not only he put in, but that he continues to put in. He continues to watch his diet. He continues to do the Harvard step test and do his ab wheel and work for it. He works for his happiness every single day, and I think that's incredibly inspiring, especially now that he's in his 70s and he still has that passion, that focus, and that drive. It makes me want to look forward and go, I'm going to do the work too. I want to feel like Bob Backlund felt in his 40s, in his 50s, in his 60s, in his 70s. If you can't get out, you can find the book in Kindle format or other digital formats all over the place. It looks like Amazon has it in Kindle. So I highly recommend it. I wouldn't be doing this book review / real talk on it if it didn't inspire me so much. So if you check it out, I hope that it inspires you as well. Thanks a lot for listening, and namaste.